Welcome to What's My Thesis. I'm your host, Javier Proenza. Every week, my guests and I share the answers we found to the questions we have. Join us as we explore and expand our worldview through research and ask, What's my thesis? And today, let's redo that because I forgot to ask you how to pronounce your name, and I don't want to
Yeah,
make
yeah, yeah. It's Kamal Badhey.
Kamal?
Kamal
Kamal?
Badhey. Yeah,
Badey?
yeah.
Okay.
So
You can
it
correct me if I do it wrong this time. Kamal Badey.
yeah, Kamal Badhey.
Kamal Badey. Welcome to What's My Thesis. I'm your host, Javier Proenza. Every week, my guests and I share the answers we found to the questions we have. Join us as we explore and expand our worldview through research and ask, What's my thesis? And today, my guest is Kamal Badeh. And where are you right now?
Um Currently, so I normally live in Brooklyn, but currently I'm in my parents' house in Long Island.
In Long Island.
Yes.
Ooh. So, did you grow up in Long Island?
Yes.
And now you live in New York as an adult?
Well, this was my pandemic pad. No,
Okay.
no, it's not even pandemic pad. It was basically my parents are senior citizens, and so I have a small room in Brooklyn, and so since things have been opening up, I've been going back there. But I teach online a bunch,
Mm,
and so like the internet was just like flowing here, and it just was not flowing there. And
mm,
so I had to kind of come here. And then also my dad was he's a physician, and so he's a senior too. So I was kind of just, I would say like, like in the front of like a pyramid or whatever, like in the front of a temple, that like guardian
mm.
animal. I feel
That's
like
you?
that was me to my parents during the pandemic. So it was like as soon as my dad through the door, I had like some signs, and I was like, go take a shower and like getting groceries. I was just really wanting to keep them alive. And so
Yeah.
I was pretty hardcore. It was pretty intense. I think they like my parents kind of were like, like as a lot of elders were like, a lot of their children were super bossy, which
Yeah.
I think you know. And so my dad's a physician, but then during the pandemic, he had a quadruple bypass, so he had to retire after. And so then we ended up taking care of him, me and my mom, and he's okay now. So
Wow.
he's survived all that. So
That's a crazy time to have to go through to like do the surgery. But
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So, okay, tell me a little bit about. So you grew up in Long Island, and
yeah.
okay, because all right, and then I'm trying to figure out a little bit more about you. So in terms of your practice, how do you define?
Okay, so I define myself in terms of my practice as an artist. I would say that I'm a photographer and an artist, and I'm also an arts educator.
Hmm.
And so,
Are you a traditional like photographer, like in the or in the traditional sense of like you use photography by the rules that photographers decided photography was to be shot, or do you like use it as an artist? You get what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's a good question. I think pretty much I use it as both actually. So I kind of like I love photography, the medium, and I teach it too. So
Mm-hmm.
I think like I'm really loving that line that straddles between like art and documentary, and so
Okay.
I've always really enjoyed that line. And I do I think for my practice I studied at Goldsmiths in university. It's part of University of London, and
Mm-hmm.
so I was in a master's called photography and urban cultures, and so it was a mixture of photography and sociology. And so actually initially when I started, I really wanted to be a photojournalist back in the day, and
Mm-hmm.
when I was like 20 years ago, when I was like in college. And so but then I started learning about like ethics. I took a class like history of documentary photography, and I started learning about ethics, and I was like pretty much appalled as a young person, and I just like didn't want to pick up my camera. And so then I started exploring like other art mediums. And
Hmm.
so that's how I got into like pretty much teaching. I didn't feel like I was good enough to draw and paint and things like that. And so I got into teaching art, and it started at a domestic violence shelter. So post college, I worked at emergency shelter for kids. And
Hmm.
so I was like with this 3-year-old, and she just started like, I was really bad. I was like supposed to do like children's advocacy groups. I don't know what I was doing. I was like 23, but like I really connected with this little girl, and she was cutting up paper and pasting it. And it's like, they were in emergency shelter. So a lot of these kids, I had to sign them up for school, and just kind of like, it was a secret location, everything. And so I just found out that like art was so healing. And so like from that point, I kind of decided I wanted to be an arts educator. So photography was always like kind of in the back of my mind, but it was something that just like I loved it so much in high school. But as I was like one of those people that was like tortured by the ethics of it, and tortured by like, representation and things like that. And sociology actually really helped me like rethink a lot of those things, because the man who started my program just really talked about this idea that like when you're taking a picture, and so when you're in the street, like if you think about urban photography and sociology, like what is that long-term engagement you have, and what's your relationship to the street, not just like the people that you're taking a picture of, but what's your relationship to the street, what's your relationship to the place. And like thinking about like, there's a subject there and you're looking at them, but they're looking back at you. So I think for me, that kind of opened up like a lot of things about identity and who I am. And I started to really like just figure out like who am I in my body, and how does that affect my photography. And so then I engaged in a lot of different projects. So I love to photograph, like at clubs, I would do that. I followed some teenagers. And then like ultimately the work that I continue to do, and I teach a class on it, is like this reconstructed family archive work. And so I take like, just like, ideas around family, and I think about like how we can reconstruct them and change narratives, and just really re-envision how we see our families. And so I'm just kind of all over the place, and I teach like 7 classes.
Do you do in terms of family, like how many siblings do you have? How big is your family?
um I mean, I have like 18 cousins that I'm really
18
close to on
cousins.
my mom's side, and then I have 2 siblings.
Two siblings, yeah. No, it's interesting also because like family's such a nebulous um thing, right? Like right there, like I asked because I grew up moving a lot, so I didn't grow
Mhm.
up in the same place as my family where like I would hang out with my cousins. I would visit my cousins like on the summer and stuff like that, right? In Miami. And so like I think of my family as like my immediate family, but
Mhm.
that's interesting. Like I always saw that people like that shared that kind of relationship with their cousins, like where it's like they're your buddy, right? Like, I mean, not that I'm like that, like buddy buddy with my other siblings, but you get what I'm saying. Like
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
idea of just like, and that's how like that happens all the time everywhere, right? Like it's just such a foreign experience to have like someone you're related to, like. I don't know what's your experience of those relationships. Can you describe them to me and how they're
Yeah,
different
yeah,
from like a
yeah.
regular relationship?
Yeah. Like my cousins, or you just
Yeah, just having
family,
cousins that
or
you just kick it with all the time, and like that you're like really close with
yeah.
because 18 cousins,
Yeah,
that's a lot of
definitely.
people. But like you
Yeah,
immediately
yeah,
went there. You
yeah.
did like I asked you about your siblings and you were like, "Well, there's also these 18 cousins." So,
Yeah,
like,
because I counted
like
once.
that was like a very specific familiar
I
that
got
like
18 cousins.
that
I
was
mean,
a very
it's
it's a very specific to your experience the way that you responded to the question of siblings, right? So I want
yeah.
to know
They're like, how
why
many
these cousins.
siblings? I'm like, I have 18. Well, actually, I think 18 might include my siblings too. And I think a lot of it has to do with my ideas of family and the family work that I do. So basically, just in general, like when I think of family, like I try not to prescribe like the ideas of nuclear family. So I
Mm-hmm.
teach this class and I'm like I always tell my students, like, you don't have to think nuclear. Like family can be chosen family. It can be your dog. It can be your friends group. It can be anything. And so I think like there's like this kind of contradiction between like me growing up on Long Island with like this nuclear family and just like this community that I, in many ways, like, like well resourced, but highly isolating. And
Mm-hmm.
then it's like going from here. Now I'm thinking about this a little bit with my work, like going from here to India and like, being around this, like, wow, like these millions of people. And so as a little kid, like I actually even have this book that I wrote. That's funny. I was like, is this right here? So when I was like 7, I was just always been obsessed with India. So I wrote this book called India, like when I was when I was 7. And it was like, it's like
Did
it's
you
like
spend a lot of time in India growing up, or is it just like a
yeah,
foreign?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. In the summer I went to India. So we used to go for weddings and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like
But
you know
are the 18 cousins all in the
no,
U.S.
no,
or
no.
oh
So
they're
they've migrated. They've migrated. These are them.
mm-hmm.
So they're not 18
What does
here,
it say on
but
that one? What does it say?
it
I
says
have a lot of cousins there. I like being in India. Okay.
yeah. And so it's like I like all these people. Like I think I wrote these are some of my cousins. And so like
Because you
I
didn't want to
think
draw 18.
yeah, I think I didn't know how many I had actually. So it was like but yeah, I think it's just this idea of like being part of a tribe, I think. And I think the more I started to investigate my family, and I've always been obsessed since I was little, I've been obsessed with lineage. So I've
Mhm.
always like wanted to know the relationships of one person to the next, and like took note in my head. Like I would memorize all this stuff. So it's like I teach this family archive class, and it's like and I did a master's thesis, but I think I was just always doing this. So it's like my brother did not really give a shit about any of it. And like when he'll be like, who is this? I'm like, that's your uncle. Like, and so we both grew up in America. So it's like really interesting, like our relationships. Like he loves our cousins, definitely. But he was like, Bruce Springsteen, like had American flag glasses and things like that. And then I just felt very deeply connected to India. And so
Mhm.
it's like same household. So it's like really fascinating. And so, yeah, so I would always be saying like, who are these relationships? And then like my cousins, I think it's like what I loved was that there were so many personalities. And then like on my mom's side of the family, like my dad's side of the family, like we had some tension like with wills and things like that. So I didn't see all my cousins. But my mom's side of the family, there was like they're really tight, and they're like I like them because they laugh a lot and we can be really lazy together and we can eat a lot. Like it's just like a joyous kind of like laziness is really like we pride ourselves in our laziness. Like everyone's like, we're like still like South Asian, like stereotypical South Asians, like this person's like going to Harvard and this person's doing this, like a bunch of like overachievers. And then but like laziness is like huge. Like we love to be lazy, and we're from Hyderabad, which is like a city that of enjoyment. And so it's like, it was ruled by the Nizam. So there's like rich food and like, so I think that has carried through in our family culture in a lot of
Mm.
ways. Like laughs, laziness, James Bond, like action movies, and like just, yeah, that's like us.
And that's funny because it's like I was just thinking of like when you have that many people together, it's hard for that many people to just hang out like in a space. Like there's usually like activities. I feel like
Yeah.
associate like it's like you're all together, so you're not just gonna sit around. Like whereas like if it's like I'm just trying to remember experiences where it was like that, where like it's like you haven't seen people in a long time, so you're all just excited and hanging out. But I think when you're like travel with your family, like with your nuclear family, or at least in my experience, we kind of just end up like going off into different rooms after a while. Like we spend a lot of time
Yeah, yeah,
together.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We
But
like I yeah.
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. We
No,
like
no.
kind of like when there's so many of us, we set up shops. There's like different people doing different things. And so it's
Mm.
like one of my cousins, he's like this amazing baker. And so he's like, I think our family is just like we don't really like prescribe anything. Like it's just kind of like, so he's like off baking, and then maybe somebody's like watching him, and then there'll be like another group just like making fun of people, and then they'll be like that's an activity. Then there'll be like another group, maybe like watching TV, watching sports. Then another group, there's like some super sale, so it's like they got to go to the super sale. And so it's like, it's like everybody's just doing something, and it's like some people are going out, some people are staying in, but it's just like activity. And so I think like with the nuclear family, you just don't have that like hustle and bustle of activity and just people,
No.
and you can dip in and dip out of different groups. I think that's something that's really fun.
But you also mentioned movies, and I get the feeling that like that's a raucous like organization to like a thing to pull off to take like at least I mean I'm guessing not every single cousin is going, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
like still it sounds like you could maybe fill like 10 seats at least easily.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. If we do that, but like now we're all adults, but like I think when we were younger, it was like we did go, and a lot of times now it's more like we watch the movies at home. So it's like,
Okay,
I think like, I mean, that's the thing too. Like when you think about like class mobility, like people's movie screens got like bigger,
and they
and
got better
like,
too, like
yeah,
high res, so it's
yeah, and
and your
technology
house is
got
pretty
better.
comfy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's like things are like changing. I think it's like when you look at the photos too, it's like you see, like, I think we had one uncle. So it's like, it's funny too, because I think also being in our family, like, even if people are not blood, they're still like, it's like everyone's an uncle and auntie, and
Mm,
everyone's like a cousin. So some people are cousins that I'm like, you're actually not my cousin too.
yeah.
So there's like always the extensions within. And so it's like, we had one uncle who was like every Thanksgiving we used to go to his house, and it was like the new technology. And so it was just like we had, like, he would put us all in a dark room, and then just like he had the new stereos, like everything, and
Yeah,
he'd
yeah.
put in like Star Wars or something. We just had to sit there, like we had to sit there and just like be enveloped by the sound. That was like
It's
a
amazing.
ritual.
Yeah, you said you the thing that you said that kind of like got my mind going a little bit is you can include your pet as a family. And to be fair, when I say this, please don't hate me because it has been a while since I've had a pet. But someone recently mentioned that like I think someone was saying that pigs are about as smart as like dogs, and I literally thought to myself like, yeah, but if a dog tasted that good, I would like eat a dog, like, and
That's awful. But it's funny though. It's funny that we discriminate, those animals that
yeah,
we eat. I was just I mean, I got a cat during the pandemic, and I was like, and I'm obsessed with my cat, and I was like, so I was like, some cultures eat you, like, and like, you have been eaten. And so it was like, it was just interesting just looking at him, like, because sometimes I look at like meat, and then I look at him, and he's like small, and I was like, I looked at the rabbit that I saw today, and I was like,
no.
some people eat you, and yeah, I think of this sometimes, like, I don't know, I have these existential moments with my cat. I never had it with my dog though, maybe because they're more domesticated.
No, but I think that cats. I definitely wouldn't. I thought about cats too, and I don't know that I would feel the same way if like pigs were as smart as cats. Like I definitely think that cats are smarter. I don't know if that's like
Cats are
statistically.
smart, yeah.
Yeah, I think that they're like pretty wise to what the fuck is going on, and I have like this weird respect for them. So I don't know. It would be that I can sort of have a little bit more of a understanding of like thinking of a cat as family. But I've also had more cats than dogs, right? Like,
Yeah,
but the dogs that I've had have been so dumb. Like,
yeah.
yeah, unfortunately, like I haven't met like a scholarly dog, but
You've met
I've,
scholarly. Are you a scholar yourself? Is
no,
that
not
what? Oh,
really.
you're not.
No.
Okay, because your thing is what's my? I was like, is this a board? I don't know who you are, so I was like, is this a bored grad student who has a podcast?
No, it's somebody who didn't go to grad school and is leeching off of everybody else's education.
Oh, cool, cool, cool.
Oh, you don't. You,
I didn't know what I didn't know who you were really. I didn't. Well,
yeah.
I'm sure everybody prepares, but I'm like, I didn't listen to. I think I
No,
listened
no,
to
that's
like a
fine.
little bit.
You're not. This is not a requirement.
Okay.
Uh,
I was like, I wanted to, but I was just so crazy busy. And I was like, I
no.
wanted to, but I'm like, you know what? It's like there was no requirement. So I'm like, I'm just gonna like go fresh.
What did you? I mean, it's just a conversation, right? Like, it's
Yeah, yeah.
ultimately.
I had like a really serious topic that I wanted to talk about. And
What
then
was
I was
it?
like, well, it was like thinking about like this moment and like, I was thinking a lot about because I was like, okay, he interviews artists. And so then I was like, something that was interesting to me, something I've been reflecting a lot about. And so I've like been between like now my parents' house and then my apartment, and then I'm gonna move. And so it's like just like what the fuck was that year, like like just
Mm,
like kind of like really really thinking about that, and then thinking about how I spent it. And so I was just like pretty much I was kind of underemployed before the pandemic.
mm,
And so like but I was teaching online before the pandemic, so somehow like during the pandemic, I don't know if a lot of teachers didn't want to teach online. People were like, oh, Kamal, you teach online, so they're like, you want to do this job? I was like, yeah. You want to do this job? I'm like, yeah. And so it took like I was had like 7 jobs during the
mm,
pandemic where I was just teaching online. And so what some of the profound parts were was like just it was like all I did. And like sometimes I would run downstairs, like take a bite to eat, then run back upstairs. And I've been working with youth for 20 years, but I've also, I left that trying to be an artist. So this
mm.
idea of wanting to be a photographer and like all these things. And so then it's like, it's just like I never got any grants, like, like I had a couple of shows, but it's like I was like, this shit's not happening. So it's like like, and so then I was like, okay, let me teach. And then initially I didn't really want to, but then it's just become like this really beautiful part of my practice where it's just like now I'm a teaching artist, so I teach with a bunch of photographers. I've taught a lot of my friends who are amazing artists that I respect how to teach. And so one thing that I've been thinking about is like, what's the role of an artist to kind of like when we're in this time of crisis, like to
Mm.
kind of just like switch your career, like not even switch your career, but like pivot your practice, And so I've been thinking about like just this year was like a huge pivot for me in many ways. So it's like I moved in with my parents, and then it's like helped caretake for them, and then also just ended up like just really being there for young people, and just like thinking about this whole idea that like a lot of society, I think like the arts kind of like got some shine, I think during the pandemic, because we realized how important they were, and then education got some shine too. And
Mm.
those are 2 huge things in my life. And I don't know, I've just been thinking a lot about like just what the capitalist demands are for an artist, and like just like this whole like grants and keeping up with it, and like self promotion and things like that. And I just kind of was like, you know what, I'm not going to have my practice really this year as much, and this is what I'm going to do. And I did take pictures and stuff, but I just kind of like let go a lot of um like just where I wanted to be as an artist. So I don't know, that was one of the topics that I was thinking about.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think also that's a very specific way of thinking of being an artist, right? Like the grant model. Like that's definitely one way to go, but not every
Yeah.
artist that is happy being an artist and happy having a practice pursues that. Like it's like, I mean, it's kind of weird because what I'm going to say, because it's like being an actor and not going to auditions, but like or like being an actor and not going to commercial auditions, I guess,
Yeah, yeah,
where
yeah.
like the real money is, but you're just doing, I guess that's the better analogy. You're doing like indie films and you're getting paid scale, right? Like, I think that there's still like, like I think it's fair to not want to invest time into that. Are you also not interested in showing anymore, or is that something that you still like?
No, I think this time period has made me rethink everything. Like
Mm.
actually like rethink like speed in which I want to do things.
Like,
And
do you
so
want to do things faster or slower?
slower, like
Okay.
super. I think I was already doing something slowly and now I want to do it even slower. Like
Like, in what sense? So, what were you doing fast, and what do you want to do slow now?
like I think I was kind of like caught up like too, especially like you know people and you're on Instagram and then you see like, oh, that person got this thing and like this and like I should be doing this. Like I think I got into that mindset. And I think part of it too is like I think I'm very confident as a teacher. Like I've been doing that for a while. I'm like pretty successful at that. But like in like I left teaching, full-time teaching. So I used to be a public school teacher. So I left it to go to grad school. And then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna like pause going back to full-time teaching and then try to like really engage in the arts. So like show my work, try to get grants. And so I did this family archive project and I wanted to like keep on going with it. And so I was like, I had so much energy after, and I was like, there's so much more I want to research, so much more I want to explore. And then I would always apply to stuff with it. And I never got grants. So I was like, maybe people just don't understand. And then when I talk about it, people are like, wow, that's super interesting. But like when
Mm.
on paper, I feel like they couldn't really like I don't know if people were understanding what I was doing on paper, but when I talk about it, I think people were super interested. And so I think like I've just been thinking a lot about like what do I want to put out there and like it's okay to like keep stuff for yourself. I
Hmm.
think as you're processing through what that is because it's like
Keep what stuff to yourself? Like, different work that you're not happy with,
yeah,
or
no,
okay.
not that it's not that work that I'm not happy with, but just work in general. Like either keep it to yourself and like let yourself show it when you're ready. Like, even if there's like something out there that like, whoa, that's me. Like that's a thing I should apply for. Like it's okay to not apply for it. Like I think before I was like, oh man, I like missed that deadline or like things like that. But now I'm feeling like really really comfortable to like not apply like and I think if that's like actually taken a lot like it's taken me a lot to be there and I feel like it's a really good place to be because I feel like it's actually making me more comfortable to be work because I don't feel
Mhm.
like there's as many external factors like to think about like what is the work that I want to make.
Yeah, and not
I
and
don't know if that
sometimes
makes any sense.
you're not always in ready in the part of the process to be critical of the work, right? And like sometimes that's what you have to do when you're applying for a grant. You have to sort of think about it in ways that maybe limit you, right? Once you start to like, you get what I'm saying? Once things go from like intuitive to like a literal sense, it can be hard
Yeah,
to
yeah,
like
yeah,
break
yeah,
out of
yeah.
that literal
That's
thinking of it. So
yeah,
it can put
yeah,
pressure on it to actually be an idea before not it's necessarily an idea, right?
yeah. And I think it's like I'm actually really enjoying the intuitive sense of it, and like it's funny because this family work that I did, I was trying to trace my great great grandfather who started this jewelry shop. And so it's called Portals and Passageways. And so I took like 3,000 pictures. I just asked people the same question about this grandfather. So just like going back to family. So it's our oldest known ancestor who started a shop in 1885. And so I was like, who was Anam Ratnaya? Where did he come from? So I went around, I asked everybody. And then I was taking pictures as a way to like, investigate. And then at the end, I like went through and I picked 20 pictures and I think of them as a puzzle. Like I don't really know everything about this family story, but I still want to find out more stuff. And so I would always show them together. And I just had more that I wanted to investigate. And so it's like I got discouraged by the system kind of like of art and like the grant making and just like being like, I know this project is good. And
Yeah.
it's like, I can't get funding for it. And I'm like, I know it's good. And so then I created a class for it. Like I created a class based on my own work. And the class is like, at first I couldn't get people. And now it's like super, super popular. So I help adults work through their family archive using my own story and my own project. So this
Hmm.
project has been used to like really help people work through their stuff. So it's like I teach it online actually, and like there's always people crying, like people have talked about a whole bunch of stuff. Like it gets super, super intimate. Like, when
Does
people
it ever get
support
like
each other.
super weird where it's like you're dealing with like maybe because I don't know. So this is maybe the question comes more from personal experience, but sometimes my dad tells me stories, and I'm like, please don't tell me this story because it's like literally a story of him being abused, not like
Yeah, yeah,
sexual,
yeah,
or
yeah.
like sometimes it's got weird sexual connotations where they're like pressuring it to hit on another little girl and stuff. But like, does that ever come up in class? Because it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah. Abuse, definitely abuse, like alcoholism, like a whole
wow.
bunch of stuff. And so it's like, and it's funny because I don't even know, like, it's just a continuing ed class and it's just gotten so deep. And so what I'm starting to realize is like there's a lot of magic, I think, in this work. And so why I think about my 18 cousins is like, to me, it's like I'm always thinking like I'm trying to always stay in this ancestral realm because I feel like by doing this work, I kind of went there and like I just feel like by teaching this class, like everyone's ancestors are around me. Like we're always like
Mhm.
accessing them and like I think there's magic in there. And then I'm like, so I
You mean
think
like
that
literal magic, like like I mean, I guess that's the question. Like, what do you mean by magic? Do you mean like you mean it like metaphorically to sort of explain something that is kind of like could a synonym be something like it's exciting, or are you talking like magic in terms of like there's a ritual process in there that sort of stays with you?
oh, that's good. I was like, well, I think it's definitely it's not about exciting. It's more about like maybe there's a ritual process that stays with you, but there's also like an unknown. Like I think there's
Mhm.
like an unknown. Like I never know what my students are going to bring. And I never knew like too when I did this work on this project, I never knew what was going to happen. So it's like so I think there's like a I don't know, it's weird. It's like the magic is kind of like I just feel like these projects drive themselves like
Mhm.
it's like we can drive like we do act as actors in them, but I think they kind of drive themselves. And so for me, it's like these photos of my project. I just had some, and so I was just using them for something. I started putting them up in the house, and like in my parents' house, and I keep on looking at them, and I'm like, I don't think I even made them. Like
Yeah.
I feel like there's like a magic in them. Like I don't even think I made them anymore. Like to me, they resonate.
Mhm.
And so I think like when you do this family work, like there's a resonance in it that I feel when I engage in the work. And like when I was doing it, I felt really like I was there. But then I think sometimes when you're not in that, there's like a kind of a stream, and I feel like I was there and really in it when I was doing the work, but then when I stop doing it, sometimes I'm not there. And I'll pick up on that with my students too, is like
Mhm.
sometimes they'll just be like, there's this synchronicity that's so weird and this has been happening, and like I found these documents and I found, and so it's like people are investigating and searching for something, and it's like I think my aunt is talking to me, and it's like it's not about like one of those talk shows where it's like my aunt is it's like it's not really that. And I was like, okay, like what's driving this? And it's like I think I believe that you know I
So the
believe in a
students are photographing this themselves. They are doing a similar photographic process. Sorry, I cut you off.
no, no, not really. It depends. So like the whole thing is that it depends on what you have and what you're looking for.
Okay.
So it's just kind of like, so one of my
Do some people
students,
write?
Yeah, so some people write. It's also like, what do you have? Like, what are you bringing to the class? Like, so I mean, one thing that's really interesting that like we've been discovering too is like when we think, are you're do you identify as like a person of color
I mean, when
or?
people let me. There's a lot of white guys. There's a friend of mine that like it's kind of strange where it keeps coming up, and I'm like, and he's like, it's just like to him, it's weird that I identify like that. When to him I'm a white guy, and I'm like, at first I was like, that's because you're not racist, and then I'm like, wait, isn't denial of like identity like part of it, racism? So I don't know. Like, yeah, I mean, it's complicated. I'm a person of color who gets, well, you're not that brown, which is fair. But it's never people that are browner than me that point that out.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
like
So
here you are validating it, like, do you identify as a person of color? Right? Like, so go ahead. Sorry, what were you saying?
yeah, like I assume, I mean, I think too it's like I'm like all about the most expansive definition of people of color because I'm like I have a lot of like biracial friends and like things like that, and I'm like, yeah,
Mm,
it's, I mean, it's in your family structure, like and a lot of it comes in family structures and generations, and so all this stuff comes through in the class and like in my own work. So it's like a lot of this stuff happens is like, so like my genealogy charts were like me like taking notes and like, because I couldn't find, you can't find anything on, I couldn't find anything on ancestry.com. So it's like,
mm,
I had to really do this work myself and like try to figure out how all these things fit and like go together and things like that. And so even just like in leading the class, there'll be people like, and what's interesting, a lot of people from Western backgrounds, like, are just like European descent will come to my class with like a giant bag of archive. And so it's like, it's so giant. There's just so much stuff that they have. And they're like, that's my grandma since 15. And so like, so it'll be a huge contrast and stuff. And
mm.
like the questions will be really like the specificity of knowledge. But I think a lot of this like has to do with like just even like recording. It has to do with oppression, colonialism, what's recorded, what's not recorded. And I think some of the magics to me sometimes, like going back to this idea of magic, is like choosing to not record certain things, and like it might be communicated through other ways too. So like
Mm.
that's what I'm trying. I feel like the, like for me, teaching and doing this work is like me always trying to figure out like what's happening, like and so a lot of this work starts because my mom, she was like she is an insomniac, and so me and her would stay up, and like I'd come home from going out and she'd just be like in a drone state, like clean, because she's like has insomnia. And I'm like, hey mom. And then she would just tell me like stories from India. And so it's like, it would be like late at night, she'd be telling me these stories, and then like her, when she's telling them, it's like her whole face, her whole face like transforms. And
Mm.
so she has this deep connection to her childhood there, and like even in her dreams, she doesn't dream in America, so she only dreams in India. And so even
Wow.
though she's been here for about like 50 years, she's still dreaming only there. And so like and then when she goes back, I know it's visual. Like, so she goes back and she keeps on telling me these stories, and they're so visual. And so like I think as a photographer, like a lot of this comes back to my mind. So I start to like, I've been to these places, but I feel like I'm also constructing from her stories.
Yeah.
So it's like I know the place, like I've been there, and she'll be like that balcony, and so then like I go and I construct that balcony. So I think it's like, I don't know, I think that's like a little bit of like like how these things get passed within families, and like what are those rituals. And I think it happens in people of Western background too, but I think like me as somebody who's facilitating it, where it's like those like kind of traditional like family history group on Friday night at the library, like I just go there and it like I didn't go there, but like I look online or like there was an online course and I was like, I can't even do step 2 of this course. Like
Yeah.
this shit's not gonna work for me. Like, so it's like
It's
how
like going to
to
Disneyland and your name's not on the license plate, toys or whatever. Javier knows all too well that heartache. Uh, that's crazy. Well, one of the things that I've been thinking about while you're talking is the idea. Well, it's like because all right, two things that like I'm Cuban. I've never been to Cuba, right? And there's like a whole disruption there, which we can't get into. Like you know, I don't think it's necessarily entirely Castro's doing that. That people are starving over there, and
Mhm.
I think that like we opened our relations with them during the Obama years, and then Trump brought it back, and like I don't know why we're not going back to it,
Mhm.
but it seems like there's some pretty bad things as an adult that I understand about the policy, embargo policy, which is like and sanctions and whatnot, and like blockades, which is crazy. But speaking more specifically in terms of family, I have a cousin whose name is my name, Javier Enrique, and
Mhm.
I've seen pictures of him and stuff like that. But I've never been to Cuba. I've never met like so. There's like a whole section of family that I didn't meet and a whole part of history that I'm kind of separated from in that sense, right? And I was starting to get a little bummed thinking about it, but then I realized that like I actually, if I was to take my kid to like where I grew up, like I had the good fortune of growing up in Italy instead of being like my parents' generation who were like refugees, right?
Mhm.
So it has a happy ending, but it is crazy how even those little things, like because we talked about the differences about how, and I'm sure this comes up in your class all the time, right? But there are a lot, like even just thinking about relationships with family members, it's so charged, right? Even if you're thinking about like fun memories and stuff like that, like I'm not even doing the assignment, but I'm already getting like I'm still getting like little like, oh yeah, this is this with this relationship. Like I'm thinking about them, and I'm having like a quiet emotional reaction to them while we're having this conversation. Like
Yeah,
just
yeah,
thinking
yeah,
about
like
it in the
those
background.
people.
Yeah, and so, it's an interesting thing. Like, I mean, I had a lot of family in Miami, so that would be where I would go back and visit, but
Mhm.
like and I don't know, there's cousins that you're closer to, there's cousins that you're closer in blood ties to but you're not that close with personally.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like it all of that is so like interesting, and it can be down to like my first cousins, I don't really know them that well. I mean, I love them and they're cool, but like their mother just didn't want to hang out with us, right? Like she like the one that's not related, like the in-law,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
and so we just never grew up together like hanging out and all of that. Like they also lived in a different part of the world, but like you get what I'm saying, like little things like that, little nuances where it's like one person marries into the family and it gets all crazy. It shifts the dynamics, right? Of
Yeah.
relationships. And then the other
Yeah.
thing that I was thinking about is like the power of photographs, right? Because like especially for our generation, maybe not so much now where it's like everything's on the cloud, but like I remember my family being very upset that a person who was an in-law, like who married, so I don't want to like air out like names and stuff because these people are dead and I don't want to like disparage them, but the idea that like um sorry, I blanked out because I was caveating the shit out of it.
It's okay. It's like the what is they call in the bottom of the book? The
Asterix. Oh,
yeah.
the notes, but yeah, the idea of like having owning the photographs, and so like my parents were really upset, and it was like one of those like things that people would talk shit about. Is like, why did so and so's wife, who is now a widow, end up with all the family pictures from like the time in Cuba? And
Yeah,
now
yeah.
that is started sort of happened where like after my parents divorced, someone in the family ended up with all the pictures, and now everybody's really pissed off because that person isn't necessarily like it has a
Yeah.
bit of a control issue, right? Like
That's
allegedly,
real. That's
you
real.
know.
Like, and this is the thing. It's like when everyone says, like, okay, there's a fire burning. What is the family album? Like the family photos, you
Sorry, say that
know?
again because
So
you
it's
kind of
like,
glitched out.
oh, did I freeze? Did I
Yeah, yeah.
freeze? Okay. So I think that's really interesting because it's like when people say, like, okay, your house is burning on fire, you can take one thing, what are you going to take? A
Hmm.
lot of times people say the family photos. So it's
Yeah.
like you think about it's like we as humans, like we acquire all these things, but we're obsessed with this like something connecting us to something. Like, where did we come
Yeah.
from? Who are we? And I think it's like really, it's really, really, or like these memories, like these things. So it's like in my class, a lot of times I have people like just like first exchange photos, look at each other's photos, like right in the perspective of somebody else's photos. But like, I do think when you're, even as a little kid, so I used to do this all the time. So it's like when you are looking at these photos, you're engaging in this like super deep level